Hello, hello, and happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to episode 26 of the Flight Attendant Show. This is the weekly series I created for everything we're curious about, challenged by, or just want to talk more about. And this week's topic, today's topic, is really important because it is all about conflict and how we can make conflict bearable because it really is an opportunity. And joining me today to talk about this topic is Leslie Nidick, who is the conflict strategist. If you know her from YouTube and you know her from LinkedIn, you know she is an incredible source of just wealth and information about this particular topic and tips and strategies to get through it. And I'm super excited about this conversation. But before we get started, as we always do, couple of housekeeping notes. I see Nathan Hill is already here. Anjan Dusa is here. Great. Everybody's here. Charity. So as you do, as everybody's doing, take a minute to introduce yourselves. Let us know where in the world you're watching Leslie and I from this morning. And any questions or comments you have for Leslie, please do not be shy. That's why I invited her here to talk about this important topic. And also, I wanted to remind everybody that in addition to the live stream here, we do live stream every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Special shout out to my YouTube channel. It is at The Flight Attendant YouTube. Looking to grow that. It's doing really well. Super happy about that. I also want to take a moment to thank a couple of people. We have been off for 2 weeks. I want to thank coaches Tanya Bugby and Sadiq Hussein, who graciously have rescheduled with me while I took 2 weeks off to deal with some life things. And I also want to thank Damian Kinsey, who proactively took next week off so I can deal with some life things. We will be back with Anjan Dusa the week after. But right now, let us do a moment of gratitude, as we always do, for all of you who are here right now. I see Sam Kane is here, Purple Reset, and Gihan. So thank you, everybody, and especially thank you, Leslie, for taking time to be with us today to talk about conflict. And I just want to, take a moment, but I want to ask you first, because again, this hour is all about you. What was it about conflict, which most people run away from, that made you want to say, this is something I really want to develop an expertise in? What was it about that for you?
I was in the middle of it every single day, every moment of the day. I started my career in facilities management, design and construction. Worked in a number of industries, everything from a private university, uh, the city of New York, then Wall Street, publishing company, even Radio City Music Hall, a telecom company. And the thing that was in common is that whether it was my internal clients who all wanted more space or wanted their space like redesigned, or I need this, I need that, or the contractors, who were my external, essentially vendors and clients, it was just there. I couldn't avoid it. Like I had no choice. So I had to find the way to how do you dig out of this? And that's where it really all started, that it wasn't that there was a book to tell me what to do. You'd read the negotiation books and I'm like, nah, I got to deal with these people every day. If I win everything, that kind of concept of don't tell them what you really want, tell them more. That doesn't work. I had to look at these people every day. And that's when I just had to experiment and figure it out. And eventually, when I wanted to go out on my own, I was like, well, what am I going to do next? Oh, I should focus on this. I want to share what I figured out about negotiation, communication, and conflict
Yeah.
management, because I realized no one was teaching it. Like no one. We didn't. It's a complete mindset shift and even skill shift of what we need to practice. It doesn't just happen.
Exactly, exactly. What do you find to be, or let me ask, is there a most common type of conflict in the workplace that you encounter?
Absolutely. If I had to categorize it, it would be people not saying what's in their head. And specifically, people don't state their expectations. They don't share their expectations. I'll
Yeah.
hear things, whether it's from a team that is in conflict or from a manager and an employee or a manager and a team, it comes down to some like, so how did they know what you were expecting?
Mhm.
Worked with me for a few years. Don't they just know?
Right, because everybody's a mind reader, right? Yeah.
So that lack of, we can't mind read is often what causes it. There's other things. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, when there's people will talk about, I want diversity in thought, diversity in people. I want to hear different ideas. And then when they hear them, it's suddenly like an attack. Like
yeah,
they don't agree with me, that means they must not like me or respect me. And that
yes.
becomes a huge thing, what their mind is telling them, rather than inviting, like, don't you want different ideas? It doesn't mean in the end we're not going to agree on what path are we taking.
Exactly.
If we don't hear different ideas, it's kind of boring. We just do the same old. And if it's not broken, don't fix it. Even if it is broken, let's not fix it.
Right, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, but some of that is rooted in people not wanting to be boat rockers, right? They don't wanna rock the boat, it may not be exactly what they want, but it's not terrible, so they'll just kind of go on, and then you layer over that the fact that, "Well, we've worked together for a few years, you know me, so you must know what I want." My boss knows I want that promotion, my boss knows I don't wanna be on that project, and so all
Oh, yeah.
those things that are assumed but unsaid, that creates layers of challenge that become conflict. But how do you turn that around and help people understand that it's an opportunity, that it can be, as we said, bearable, right?
Right. So I, many steps. So that reason that we end up in conflict, particularly in the workplace, is it starts with not speaking up, not
Yeah.
asking a question. Not a big deal. I didn't get my turn to speak. That's okay. And then the layers start building. And then we have deep rooted, complicated conflict because it's been building, whether for weeks, months, and quite often years.
Yeah.
So to so then conflict becomes, it is, I have to avoid it. What are you talking? It's not an opportunity. This is horrible. In fact, I'm going to quit and go to another job. But yet the
Yes.
real issue doesn't go away because it's with us that we didn't speak up because we thought we couldn't.
Yeah.
And we have to change the mind. Our mind thinks like, okay, let's go in protect mode because I feel conflict. I feel a different idea. I'm not going to speak up. And we have to change how our mind thinks about that, where conflict, yes, is stressful, is difficult, is bad because we usually leave it unmanaged.
Right.
So now we have to switch it to, how do we get to conflict as conversation?
Oh,
It
yeah, I love
may
that.
be
Yeah.
many steps for people, but we have to get our mind to really believe like conflict is a conversation. I don't mean just a conversation. It can be an important conversation. It can be a difficult one. It can be stressful. But if we keep those adjectives as the primary focus, then our mind goes into protect mode. Okay. No, not to, I'm going to shut down. I'm actually not going to talk. I'm not going to share. I'm not going to say
Right.
what's on my mind. So I think and for each person, it'll be different, but they
Yeah.
always have to go through that whole flow of conflict is difficult. Well, then define difficult and kind of get there that no, conflict is opportunity. That's
Yeah.
gonna take years and experiences to confirm it. But can we get to conflict is talk, conflict is chat, whatever word sounds good and find that way to transition to the word that's not gonna shut you down. It's
Yeah.
gonna get you to talk.
Yeah. I love that. And actually, as Anne says, we all deal with conflict every day. And I think that anytime you have more than one person, exactly, you're going to have conflict. It's going to happen. It's a natural
Yeah,
byproduct of human nature because we have thoughts and opinions and perception. No two people are going to have the same perception of anything. We were talking about this with Don Cohen yesterday on his live stream, that no two people are going to have the same experience with the same experience. And I use the example of my husband and I after the house blew up. I had a panic attack a couple nights later, and he's sleeping like a baby. And I was like, "How is this possible? What's going on here?" Now, that's not conflict, but that's an example of two
Yes.
vastly different perceptions and understandings and ability to deal with the same situation. So conflict would also be, the same thing, like how you're looking at things. I love looking at it as an opportunity because there's so much you can learn from the other person's perspective and the difference of thought, opinion, experience, and all those things. So you're both right. It does. It happens every day. I think it's such an important thing that you're doing. And like we were talking about before we went live, especially right now, it seems like we are in a time where the ability to have constructive discourse, real conversation is is challenged because we're sort of in this, like you said a few minutes ago, if you don't agree with me, we're at odds. And we can still have a conversation. You don't have to agree with me. I know that Chastity Alexander, this is a very benign example, but I know she's in the audience today. She said hi. She greeted me yesterday with a Roll Tide. I greeted her back with a War Eagle. We have conflict when it comes to who we think is a better football team in Alabama. That's a benign example, but you can escalate that really quickly, really easily. But some people will take something like that and it becomes a big deal. Their identity is rooted in their opinion. And so I love that you talked about that the unraveling of this and the really getting comfortable with what conflict is can take a long time. It's a process.
It is. There's something you said about perception, perspectives,
Mhm.
and one way to think about it, and this is the simplest of where when it happens, that when I say a word, if we ask everyone who's in the comments as well as with us,
Yeah.
we're probably going to define it very differently. And I'll pick one that happens all the time in the office,
Yeah.
and I'm going to finish that soon. Now they walk away. They know each other, so they know when soon is. And then you find out one person thought soon was by the end of the day. The rest of the team might have thought soon is, oh, it's 2 weeks from now, of
Yeah.
course. And whatever it is, but they never talk about it. So we assume that we're all thinking that same thought. And then we get in that thinking, we've worked together a long
Yep.
time, or we've worked together even a short time. We've done 3 projects together. I know what this person means. And we don't even think of it consciously. We don't even pull that word out and go, wait, what got us into this? Oh my God, we
Mhm.
used that word soon. I should have said by 5 o'clock. And then they could have talked about, well, what they could get done by 5 o'clock, but they never talked about it. And that becomes a big thing. And the other one is, like you said, with Roll Tide. I know people from Alabama, I get that.
Yeah.
So I know there's a friendly, not so friendly rivalry, depending on,
Right.
but just because you have a different team than I do, whatever, or a different thing that you like, than I do, it's about you. You're not attacking my choice. You
Right.
choose that, you went to the school you went to and you're loyal to it. That doesn't mean that, oh, she thinks that the school I went to is no good and not worthy. So it's about you. You're not attacking me with your thought. But that's what happens of why people don't want to offer different ideas
Yeah.
or this concept of asking a question that seems like I'm disagreeing. Like disagreement is has this real negative connotation.
Yeah.
And don't you want to have people say you're talking about a project and someone goes, you know what, let's go back to step one. I'm not sure it's going to end up the way we think it is. Let me tell you why. And they'll poke holes in it. Now, maybe everyone else will say, oh, I know how to fill that hole. And then they'll all be in agreement like, yep, now step
Yeah.
one works because we talked about it. But many people will be afraid to ask that because they're like, well, no one else here is asking.
One of the techniques that I love to do when I perceive a conflict happening is, or if I just have a disagreement, is the yes and, right? yes, I hear what you're saying. And I also think so by doing that, I want the other person to know I'm validating. I hear you. I hear you. And
Yes.
I am in taking that in. And now I'm adding some thought to that because now I can add a layer of my perception along with that. So now I can marry the two up. So we're not, we have a partnership now instead of a conflict. The yes and I've always liked that one because I do find it to be like, what is it they say? Milk on a chili pepper. Like it's just a calming kind of thing to do because it's also an invitation to the other person. It's like when somebody cuts you off and that can create conflict. You don't want to hear what I have to say. Like there's that perception of why would you cut me off? That's rude. And you don't want to hear what I have to say. And a good strategy for that I love is hang on, hang on. I think you're going to want to hear what I have to say. And then as soon as you're done, you invite the other person back in. So what did you think about that, Leslie? What do you think? Do you like that idea? And then you ask that person, you invite them back in. So like with strategies to help people through these types of conflicts, do you, and I love what Charity says here, clear communication dissolves most conflicts. And you had just mentioned
Yes.
that it's that ability to provide that communication, that information for the other person. Do you find that to be a sticking point with any of your clients? Like that's a bridge they have a little trouble getting over?
I know that during the pandemic, it was highlighted because
Yeah.
most people were communicating by Zoom or some other electronic version. And they
Mhm.
thought they could just say things in the same way. And the one thing that I noticed that people didn't do is feedback. So I'd watch and observe what they were doing in the meeting where they said, listen, everyone leaves and like they end up not doing what I wanted them to do.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what's happening. And what was happening is they weren't ever asking for feedback. They were doing things like the end of the meeting, like it was supposed to end at 3 p.m. So at 2:59 and 30 seconds, any questions? Well, no, they're like, see, no one had questions. No, no, you pretty much told them don't ask any. What do you mean?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
left 30 seconds, everyone had to run to their next meeting and needed maybe to use the restroom, get a drink of water or something. So, you pretty much told them questions were not, something you wanted.
Yeah.
They couldn't come to you. Wow, was that what I was communicating? Yes, like, our actions and how and when they
Yeah.
changed it to I said, ask what are your questions, but not at the end of the meeting. Insert it and let people know maybe they won't ask any because they need to hear it a few times to know questions are welcome.
I think that is a bit of genius right there because that's also something that I think a lot of people may look over in how conflict can be created through an action or just not thinking about it. If you have a meeting and you have a defined amount of time, but you leave no time for questions, yet you're asking for questions, you're immediately creating a conflicting situation where you're asking for something that you've provided no opportunity to happen. And so I love that you address that as well, because I do think there are probably a lot of people who may, without it realizing it, create those kinds of scenarios. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and that and when the person changed it and started doing what they're like, well, no one asked questions. I said, maybe during the meeting, what happened after?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So and so came up to me the next day. I said, so you're letting them know you're inviting it. Everyone's going to find their way that, but let them know that too. Hey, if you don't know, if you don't have a question now, I'm open to it tomorrow. Send me an email, give me a call. I want to have your feedback. And by the way, go and check in with them too. You need to invite it. People are not, oh, they know they can come to me. Do they really? No, they don't. You
Yeah.
created this habit of them not knowing, so now you have to reteach them that it's okay, and that's a big piece, the asking
Yeah.
the questions, because people feel, "Wow, I'm supposed to know this, so I better not go and ask." They'll whisper to somebody else, "Hey,
Yeah.
do you remember what she said?" "No, I wasn't listening to that part because it's not part of my project." So, they're like,
Yeah.
well, what am I gonna do? Well, you gotta go ask the meeting leader. I don't
Yeah.
wanna do that. They're gonna think I don't know. Well, you
Right.
don't. Isn't that okay?
Yeah,
So say
exactly.
I don't know when you don't know.
That's so interesting. I wanna take a moment because I do wanna be sure that everybody has the benefit of knowing how they can connect with you. So again, if you're just meeting Leslie, so you can see her website here, theconflictstrategist.com, and then, of course, she is at Leslie Nidick on LinkedIn. Her YouTube, again, The Conflict Strategist, so you definitely wanna check that out. We were actually just talking about her YouTube channel before we went live today, but you definitely wanna check her out and get to know some of the strategies and things that she has going on. This is also her website. So definitely take a look at that. And for everybody who's new, who's just come into the chat, welcome everyone. We've had some great comments so far, and I have enjoyed all of them because I do think this is such an important topic. And it brings me back to Charity was just saying, and this is a bigger one, so it's going to take up probably about this much of the screen. But I want to put it up here because I think it's so important. You know, we become so polarized as a society. So this is leaked into our interpersonal communications too. When our goals are at opposite ends of a spectrum, a simple difference of opinion can immediately feel like possible loss of what we value. And it's cutting off a little bit because that is unfortunately what Restream does with comments. So if you, let me see if I can read the next one. Hang on. I can't read it because it's blocked off, but I'm sure it was brilliant because she's brilliant. But I think that's so important because, like we were talking about, we seem to not have the ability, and I don't want to generalize, but I think I just did. But it does seem to be more challenging now than I remember in my life to have meaningful, constructive conversations about big topics because that difference of opinion, if there is one, it's like an immediate, no, I can't. I don't want to hear what you have to say because it might threaten what I know about what I believe I know about what I'm about to say, right?
Very much so. We're on different sides, and that's how some people say, I'm like, "Okay, well, I wanna hear all the sides."
Yeah.
I'm curious. We lost, like, that be curious, and again, it's just because you have a different idea, opinion, thought. Okay. That's not telling me that mine is not valid. And maybe it's because we're all like shouting to be heard. Everything's in very quick bites. You don't have a chance to talk. And that's why I always say, let the other person talk first. Like we have to
Yeah.
get back to some good listening. By the way, we were never taught how to listen. We just thought we were born. Like, this is how you listen.
Yeah.
And active listening truly is, I mean, it's a lifelong skill to build. It's I don't know anyone who can perfect it because there's always something that distracts us. But we really have to listen to people. It's not about us first. Listen to them first. And then of course someone will throw back, well, then I never get to go. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. You will be able. You need to be if you want to lead, be a leader and lead communication, lead by letting other people talk first. Listen, because then if you have something to say, they're more likely to listen as well. And maybe they've learned some of your habits and they'll mirror it rather than
Yeah.
saying I, they're going they're going to think about like, well, what do you think about that? I really want to hear that.
Yeah.
What would you have done? What was your challenge when you experienced that?
Yep.
I wanna hear what you have to say, not me saying, "Oh, I remember when that happened to me."
Yeah. Yeah.
It probably wasn't the same, and that
Ye
takes away.
Yeah, do you ever find that people, and I know I'm guilty of it too. I've talked about it. It's not unknown. I've talked about on this show and others that, I'm always like, "Oh, I wanna help. I have this, bleh." So, I am always like, I telegraph everything, and so it's very obvious when I'm like, "Oh, I wanna say something," but I know I need to cool it because,
Yes.
I really need to take in. So, do you find that that also is a contributor to conflict when people have already formed their opinion before they know what yours is? So they know what they're gonna say before hearing you out.
The assumptions are not facts, and but they are used as facts. They're like, "Well, I know the person, I've worked with it," and of course, we're focusing on workplace, and that's why this happens. They're like, "Well, I've already worked with them." You've made all these decisions
Yeah,
about what they're thinking. You have no idea. You never asked. What are you thinking? Did you give time? And the workplace, because it's so rushed, it feels like it's gotten more rushed. Deadline, deadline, deadline.
Yeah.
And we skip over the communication. No, no, I sent an email and told them what I needed. I announced it in a meeting. Where's the two-way or three-way or multi-directional communication? It's a lot more one way. I send a message, it should be received as I intended, but I can guarantee written messages are rarely received as intended.
Which is exactly what this comment is saying. The worst part of conflict is always when it's addressed in writing or text versus old-fashioned conversation. And that just speaks perfectly to what you were just saying. And do you think that's in part because, like, there's no real inflection in the written,
Oh,
in
yes.
writing, and when people try to offer it, it looks like shouting because it's italicized or capped or something like that.
I so what before I became focused on conflict, there was this one woman in one of my last corporate jobs that she'd send these emails, and I just knew to see if I saw her name in the inbox, I'd walk over because she wasn't that far away. She was just on the other side of the floor. I'd say, "Oh, I was running to a meeting. I saw your name in my inbox. What were you thinking?" And then she'll say it. And then I go and read her email, and I'm like, "Oh god." If I had read the email, it always came off as, like, yelling at me, like, "Why isn't this done now?"
Yeah.
Kind of, and I heard that voice, but when she said it, it'd be like, "Oh, you know what? I want to talk to you about such and such project, see what you were thinking, when we can get together on it." I was like, "That is not what you wrote." And they forget that the voice in their head is not I'm reading it with the voice in my head, which is
Right.
different because of the way she writes it, like you said, with the caps or the
Yeah.
exclamation points or the lack of greetings. All of that sets the tone. So if we are writing only, we have to really think about it. And a lot of times I don't send the note right away, even if it's urgent. I like stop the urgent. The
Yeah.
world isn't going to end because I didn't send the email 3 minutes ago.
Right.
And then read it again and go, oh, wait, I have to add some other words in here to make sure
Yes.
that I can try to convey the tone.
Yes, yes, and I'm trying to show a lot of these comments because they are excellent, excellent comments coming through today. It's one of the things that I've worked with people on communication because there are some, like you were saying, some of the ways that salutations are written or exits are written. Please advise is that's one that's always a red flag. I've never worked with anybody who had a beneficial reaction to please advise at the end of an email. And it's one where the person generally thinks that it's an incredibly professional closing, and without realizing that it usually is a brick wall that they're building as they're closing the email. And people close those out and think, please advise. I'm not going to advise you. Advise you about what? Right. So, is that something that you also help your clients understand in terms of those small things that we don't think about in communication?
Like just even the one of communication, start with a smile. Even if the meeting is really whatever it is, serious, a calamity, a tragedy, but first connect with the person, even if it's just a brief smile because you're upset about something. But if
Yes.
you just start, know what your face is expressing or what your greeting is expressing,
Yeah.
because otherwise they've put up the brick wall and they actually never heard it. And I've seen it with like feedback meetings or evaluation meetings. I'm like, do you know that she never heard that you told her like she was number one, that she like improved 100%? They're like, what do you mean? I go, because you started out with you and this and that. You said you, they never heard anything after. And that's like one of the little
Yeah.
skills that like use I versus if someone says you first, the rest of the phrase is assumed to be you're going to tell me what I'm doing wrong or not doing well. And even if they heard it, their mind put up we protect ourselves.
Yes.
So it's back to that mindset thing that we have to think about the impact of our words, and we don't always know what they are. I might
Yeah.
say a word that triggers you. Listen, a lot I remember when the word disruption was being used started to be used as something positive. Like, "Oh, she's disrupting the industry." I mean, I cringed. I'm like, "Disrupting the like, because that word disrupt, like,
Yeah.
you couldn't disrupt in the classroom, like, growing up, that word disrupt I couldn't get rid of it in my head until I changed it in my head.
Yeah.
Like, "Hey, disruption is a good thing. Let me think about that." And I had to shift the mindset. Otherwise, when people said the disrupt, it, like, triggered me, and I couldn't hear the rest of what they were talking about. So we all have to be just much more self-awareness is really important. To
Yes.
know that just because they used a word that does trigger you, they weren't doing it to trigger you. It's about
Yeah.
how you're responding.
Yeah, I think that's so important because it's sort of part of seeing the world in terms greater than yourself, which is very difficult for a lot of people. You know, you'll a great example, and it may not be conflict centric, but I see this a lot too, where people will have an absence. They will have something that happened in life that took them away from maybe a daily, post or something like that, and they'll come back with apologies. So sorry I've been gone for a while, because to them it's noticeable. Like, I just apologized for the 2-week lapse in, because this is a weekly series, the flight attendant. So I apologized. To a lot of people, they may not have noticed that because a lot of people watch the replay of this. And so, but to me, it was a significant amount of time. That's me not looking at the world in terms greater than myself. But if I do, then it would just be, we would just move on. But a lot of times we think that what is monumental for us, or just is important for us, or is something we believe, well, everybody else must too. Because, right? I'm the center of the universe in my world, but I'm not the center of your universe, right? And I shouldn't be.
Exactly. I remember when I first heard someone say, "You've gotta get yourself in the balcony." I'm like, "I don't even know what they're talking about." And then it was realizing, like, "Yep, I've gotta, like, visualize myself in the
Yeah.
balcony so that I'm, like, looking at the situation more objectively." We'll never be completely objective, but if I can get closer to being objective, I'm like, "Ah, now I'm seeing it different."
Yeah.
I there's some easy ways to do it. Like if you have a meeting or a team that you're constantly meeting with, people tend to be physically situated in the same spot all the time, whether it's around a
That's so
table,
true.
whether it's where their little
Yeah.
cubicles are.
Yeah.
If you wanna lead communication, just change it, like, sit somewhere else, like, get everyone to stand at the coffee bar, and make sure you're not next to the person you're always next to because you're missing all their body language. You think you're hearing their voice, but you didn't see their body
Oh,
language. And the same thing, they didn't see you. So
yeah.
mixing even that up is that kind of thing of get in the balcony because you need to physically see things from a different angle. I do it. Now you may not be able to read upside down. I don't know why that's my
I
like
learned how to do that
way of
as a
reading.
reporter, I will say. Yeah.
I learned to read upside down. So, but I do also read upside down, like say I'm proofreading something
Mhm.
or I wanna see how it sounds. I turn it upside down and I'm like, "Oh," like, first of all, I always see the errors, like, "Oh my god." I and big errors, when one letter can change the meaning of a word.
Mhm.
So but you have to do that with our communication with our teams, with the people we work with. Change it up.
Yeah.
Walk with the person, be side by side because the communication is gonna be different than when you're facing each other. Um, Go for the coffee, go to the water cooler, like, where are the comfortable conversations? And have the difficult conversations in that comfortable environment.
What a great idea. I love that you said that too about body language, because I don't think that I think about it a lot, but you just reminded me, one of the things when I'm working with clients, I do most of my sessions are distanced now sessions. And so we do Zoom and I record all of them and the client gets the copy. And I've had people where I've said during session, when you watch this, you want to go to, minute 33 or whatever it is, because your entire facial expression changed when you were talking about that situation. And I had this happen a couple of times where I time stamped it because I was like, I want you to look at how different you look talking about this right there. And it can be great or it can be bad, like a good reaction or a negative reaction, but there's something in that. And you're right. The whole body language changes, and it's one of the things when I talk to people about when you're interviewing and you talk about body language, you know, confidence comes through in your body, right? If you're hunched over and
Yes.
you're like, and your voice, it can come through, you know, false confidence also comes through, and in terms of
Yes.
shouting and things like that, and interrupting is definitely a marker of false confidence in a lot of ways. But I think that's such an important thing, and especially the part about having, as you said, difficult conversations in a comfortable place. It doesn't sound, it just, there's everything about that makes sense to me, and I would have never thought about that. I'm so glad you said it.
The body language one is key. I think that Zoom and all these kind of recorded things gives us a unique opportunity to see ourselves recorded, even though, because the pressure of recording sound like, oh, okay, now I'm going to record myself talking. No, no, you
Yeah.
need a recording of how you normally are speaking. We have to look in that mirror because I remember the first time that someone answered a question that I had not asked. And
Mhm.
I said, "How did how did you know I was thinking that question?" They're like, "It is all over your face." And that's when they're like, "Your face speaks loudly." And I'm like, "Oh my God, what do I do? I have no idea." I didn't know that we were supposed to manage our face.
Yeah.
And I had to because when I first went into conflict management as my career, I was in situations where I had to judge situations, more in arbitration or even as a mediator where I was facilitating the conversation.
Yeah.
I had to learn how to, it wasn't about me. It was all about them and their information. I was just the kind of vessel they were speaking through. But my body language couldn't show partial opinions. I had to remain impartial and I had to figure out how to manage them. So I think Zoom, when people a lot of people won't they'll remove so they don't see themselves, and I'll
Yeah.
suggest I understand it's distracting to keep on seeing yourself, but you at least half the meetings, keep
Yeah.
yourself on so you could see what you're doing naturally, and then maybe next time be a little more intentional, like, "Yeah, you were never smiling ever. They said
Yeah.
hello. Let's smile." Otherwise, you're sending a very clear message. So
Yeah.
is that the message you wanted to send? If it is, go ahead and do that, but know what messages you're sending.
It's interesting because, and one of the things I always tell people too, and you've done these as well, so like the comments for me, because I have a sort of a portal, a studio here. So if you see my eyes going over here and I'm looking at comments to bring up on the screen. So, oops, sorry. So it's not that I'm not paying attention, but those subtle cues could be misinterpreted and misread.
Yes.
I've asked people. So, for example, if you're in a meeting and somebody picks up their phone and begins to engage with their phone, and you have an opinion about that, and it's generally, especially if you're presenting, it's generally not going to be a favorable one. And I've talked with people about that. I've said, okay, that's fine, but we're assuming facts, not an evidence. You're just assuming that they weren't interested in what you had to say. So now we're going to engage with this. What if it was a 911 text from their child's school? Does that change your opinion about the need for
Yes.
them to engage? And again, it's all about what we perceive, what we think, and what we don't know. So, like you're saying, with conflict, that immediately presents one, but there's an opportunity there. What am I not seeing that I should consider? Right?
And I could tell you when I see 2 people in high conflict, and one is sending me body language that maybe it's not that they're looking at the phones because 'cause I've already had everyone put those away, but they're showing that they're distracted. I won't attack going, "Oh, you look distracted. Aren't you gonna pay attention?" I'll just
Yeah.
say, "Oh, would now be a good time for a break?" And I'll get the yes, because maybe it is that they're itching, that they're wow,
Yeah.
I'm waiting maybe for the teacher to call. Um, I thought someone, my spouse, my husband, my friend was going to let me know when they were done with their, medical appointment. They don't have to divulge that or talk about it, but just respond to what body language they're saying, but not in an attacking way. Like, yeah, now would be a great time. Or I've done it. I was even teaching a course once where I had to tell everyone ahead of time, just so you know, I'm gonna be glancing at the phone. I told them why. They were all like, "Oh, no problem. We have an idea. Could one of us hold your phone for you? And if we see that number come through, we're gonna, take the."
Good. Yeah.
Oh, that would be great, thank you. So then I even got them involved where they were thrilled too, so for during the session when the call didn't come till the end, I was able to focus, I felt very comfortable. It really changed because they heard me. I said, I'm really nervous about this.
I
I'm
could
waiting
see
for
that
this
as
call."
Yeah, I could see that as a best practice, even for meetings like that where you have a presenter. I love that idea. I've never heard of that, but I think that's genius as well. I mean, are there any sort of like those kind of preventative maintenance strategies that people can start to think about in terms of conflict or just best practices in
Abs
general? Mhm.
It's knowing that what we think we've done well, because, hey,
Mhm.
we've gotten to this age already, we must know how to communicate. Communication is such a complex mixture of skills that by themselves may seem simple,
Yeah.
but to integrate them into your everyday communication is difficult. So, like a few that come to mind, especially in the workplace, questions, how to ask the best questions. I think that it gets in our head that we're supposed to just say like what, when, where,
Right.
these very um, fact kind of driven questions. We see it all the time, like on TV or whatever. Using open questions is very not what we're used to
Mhm.
because they also give up a lot of control. So, open questions like how? What you said, yes, but
Yeah.
and as a and, you don't know what's gonna come after
Yeah.
that, but that's how you can ask open questions. And the other one is get rid if you hear yourself saying "and" in the middle of a question, stop, because you're probably asking 2 or 3 questions at the same time, and you're not gonna get an answer to all those questions. The other one is when someone asks me a question, do I have to like, just the moment they stop talking, do I have
Yes.
to answer? No, if you ask me a thoughtful question that I didn't know or expect, or maybe I don't know the answer, I can pause and think. I might have to pause and think for a while and go, wow, that's a great question. I'm going to write it down. And after our meeting, I'm going to think about it and get back to you because I want to put some thought into it.
Yeah.
Um, The big one is stating expectations. Never assume, but let it be a multi-directional conversation. State what you expect,
Mhm.
let them absorb it, go back later and go, hey, I just wanted to check in about the things that I said I need. What are you working on? What's your plan? So it could be a conversation and go, oh, okay. You might even hear an idea that you wasn't part of your expectations. Or you might have to hone in and go, how would that work? I'm not sure that aligns with what I was expecting. Let's see if we can merge that. So it becomes a conversation. And, a big one is say you don't know when you don't know. The workplace, it seems to be like it's, removed from most people's vocabulary. I
Yes.
don't know. And I'm going to go find out. I'm not sure how, but I'm going to go ask other people. I'm going to call a few friends that work in other companies in a similar role, and I'm going to see what I find out. So let it be like that's proactive. Otherwise, yep, I'll take care of that. And then you ignore it, ignore it, ignore it because you have no idea how to do it. And then it just builds and builds.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but last but not least, the mindset shift. Like,
Yeah.
Sensing that there's conflict, figure out a way to turn, whether it takes 100 transitions or a few, reframe conflict in your mind to get it to be something that has a little bit of hope or optimism in it. And because without it, the minute that you sense conflict, you're shutting down and you're leaving it and you swipe that away. And then it happens again, and the layers and layers are built,
Yep.
and they they're almost cemented in. And then someone like me comes in and goes, "Yeah, I know I can get you unstuck, but this is going to be
Yeah.
a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But why are we stuck in the first place? Like,
Yes.
let's deal with it in the moment and just accept people have different ideas."
Yeah.
And but shifting the mindset, because if it's a running mindset, I'm letting you know there is one time when you could swipe away conflict, when you are never going to see the person again. Don't deal with it. Okay. Chances are it's going to reoccur with other people because you didn't
Yeah.
deal with whatever that miscommunication
Yeah.
is. But thinking that you could swipe it away, it really does get worse. It always gets worse.
Interesting. I love when you were talking about going back and asking, because it reminded me of when you were talking about when you're in the meeting and the leader of the meeting asks questions, doesn't leave enough time for them. So now you've gotten them to reframe that meeting so that they are having a healthy amount of time for questions to be asked. Then, if they go back after that person's asked their question, and they've gotten that information after the meeting and they say, "Hey, how's that going?" They revisit that question. Does that also go further into chipping away at potential future conflict, but also building healthier relationships in the process?
Absolutely. And then sharing that with the group, like figuring
Yeah.
out, hey, you know what? I've had some questions after the meeting. I'm assuming that if one person had the question, maybe others did, or some form of it, or you didn't even know it was a question in your mind.
Yeah.
So let me
Yes.
share that. Like, start the next meeting, whether if it's a project, start that next project meeting with, let me just tell you what's been shared in between meetings. And make sure everyone has the information. Otherwise, you're not building a team. You may be building a relationship with that one person and better
Yeah.
communication. But the team needs that, all that back and forth and the twisted turns of
Yeah.
communication.
And I think what you're also doing is you're helping to sort of chip away at that fear of asking the question in the first place, raising your hand, which then you could make maybe a mental corollary over to raising a hand to say, "I don't know," which is a huge thing for people, to say, "I don't know" on something. But I also think it's, to me, it's also like a really good opportunity and a huge sign of respect for somebody who wants somebody to know something, and you're like, "Not only do I not know, but I'm gonna make it a priority to find out," which is what you said.
Yes.
I love that
Yes.
because that also validates to the person who asked, "Do you know?" that it's worth knowing because I'm now gonna go and I'm gonna find out about it, which is a
Exactly.
huge thing. I think that also is another way to alleviate potential future conflict. But I think, there've been so many good nuggets here, and like we talked about, I'm looking forward to going back, and anybody who watches the replay, because there's so much here. You're gonna have so many shorts for your YouTube channel off of this one because it's just such a good conversation, and there've been so many tips and just strategies to employ here. Do you ever find, now we know the one time you can swipe away conflict is when you're never going to see somebody again. Okay. Is there a type of, maybe there's an ongoing situation or you have an enterprise that has many different parts, and so you might have siloed conflict that then can spill out into other areas?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I worked in a company where I was with the chairman and I said, because I was there about 6 months, he goes, "What do you think? I bet you know," because as my job with facilities and real estate, I pretty much met everybody versus some people are in the silo. I said, "Uh, we have some silos here." He's like, "Yeah, I know. It's organized chaos." I said, Is it good organized chaos? Like, tell me what you mean. Because he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, people in that other state who think they're corporate headquarters. He goes, well, they are for their silo. I said, I know, but they don't understand that there's actually like a corporate headquarters. I could service them. They think they're doing everything on their own, and now I have to fight with them. So I, I think the silos definitely create conflict where you think you're your own entity and I can operate on my own,
Yeah.
whether it's
Yep.
a one person or a whole division. Is that what kind of company you want where everything is just separated? And
Yeah.
that's what happens on a team where people believe, working on a team is hard.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do my individual work. I'm going to finish it. So I'm going to score big because I'm going to do the best job possible. But it's not really the best job possible because you need to work with the team. And they really haven't experienced what a great team is because it truly does happen. Like a great
Yeah.
team multiplies the success. And they think it's just about the individuals getting added up to be a team um,
Yeah.
win, and it's not. You
Yeah.
accomplish more. So but it takes great leaders, and unfortunately, we many of us have experienced the kind of toxic work environments, whether it also involved a bully boss or not,
Right.
and that creates experiences that we take with us to the next place. And that's why we'll hesitate to protect ourselves. Our mind is telling us, I can't go through that again. So let me shut down a bit. I'm going to hide more. I'm not going to say I don't know because I was
Right.
punished in that other place because anyone whose fault it was got the blame. That's one of the signs for me. Like if someone's walking around looking, I got to find out who did that. Why?
Yeah.
Why? Tell me
Yeah.
what's gonna happen when you find out who did it. Let's figure out how to fix the problem rather than
Yeah.
blame the people.
Not to mention that it's one of those situations where you had mentioned earlier that sometimes conflict and avoiding conflict will cause people to leave their job. But now they're
Yes,
bringing that avoidance behavior to the next job. And so
exactly.
teaching them the strategies that you do helps them sort of mitigate that happening in their, in their professional future. Yeah, and definitely siloed departments can create conflict. Shared goals and a shared mission helps break that down. I think that's really important also to communicate that to people that you are, everybody sort of has that same goal, even if they're not aware of it, Yeah. Yeah. Why do you
Oh,
need to?
yes.
Yes. Oh, yes,
I c
definitely. Charity. Yes. I love
I
that
can't
comment,
wait to
Leslie.
get
Yeah.
in the I can't wait to get into all the comments. For everyone who's here, just know I'm one of those people. I will definitely be visiting the comments and responding to everyone because I think I've met Gretchen in the comments. I've met most of you who I see in
Yeah.
the comments. I met you in a comment. It's just it's a great conversation to hear other ideas, to just think a little differently. I'm just curious like
Yeah.
how the mind works. That's where, if you ask someone logically, so you want everyone in your meeting to think exactly the same? And most people
Right.
say, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
But their actions show they do. And do we really want that? That is so boring. If
Yeah.
everyone in the room is thinking exactly the same, then why am I here? You don't even need me. I'm a robot. I can just be, look at AI. You
Yeah.
don't need me to think. You don't need me to question, but we do. That's why we're together. That's why people are arguing about whether go back to the office or not, because they're
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to keep the communication going. Because it
Yeah.
is hard when you're constantly scheduling. I think there is a loss that we felt during the pandemic. I call it like the water cooler, but
Yeah.
the conversations we had that were not planned, the interactions you had because you ran into someone in the elevator, you heard them talking, and then you call them and go, oh, I heard you talking about this project. I'm working on something that seems to intersect with what you're doing. We don't get those kind of conversations happening now. We have to be really intentional about trying to create that
Yeah.
brainstorming or just chatting or uh, having a coffee chat with people, but in other departments. Like now you have to schedule it and go, why are you calling me? I don't know. You work in a department that sounds interesting. I'd love to hear about it for 15
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember during, but before I left corporate during the pandemic, my team was all distributed, and we would start the day with a daily stand up and that kind of thing. But there was one team member who just became increasingly disengaged. And we all, I mean, we'd been together for 7 years, so we all knew each other very well. And I was very concerned. And at one point, I just started kind of watching the stand-up reviews and watching the behavior and watching the repetitive kind of, it was the same update every day. And I just reached out and I was like, "Hey, how are we doing? What's going on?" And I was like, "We know each other, so let's just put all the stuff away. We know each other. I'm actually asking you how you're doing." And it
Yes.
was such a difficult time, not work-wise. This was somebody who had got, with the pandemic, like a lot of people, was started the pandemic in one relationship. That relationship did not survive the pandemic. Now they are by themselves. We are still in lockdown, loneliness, and then that sort of not really feeling like the world is there to be engaged with, and everybody's on a screen. And it was that one-to-one communication, but it was also, and it's interesting because I guess I was paying attention to his body language, and I guess I was paying attention to the language when I didn't realize I was. But it was just one of those things where, like we said at the beginning of this conversation, we knew each other. We'd been, working together
Yes.
for a long time. And so it was one of those things where it was really important to me to be sure that everybody was okay. But that was something that I think from a professional standpoint, people didn't think about the humanness part of it. And I think we say we did, but I don't know that we did. And I'm glad that
Yeah.
we had the opportunity, but I don't know that we did.
But the key was that you took what you saw in a group meeting and you moved it to one-on-one because you just
Yeah.
sensed like that was the right thing. I think the issue of asking, how are you, really comes to the surface when I teach sometimes cross-cultural communication to people who are not from the United States, who can speak English, but they're like, we want to be able to like talk like English in the business place and be understood.
Yeah.
And they do, and every group asks me the same thing. I don't get this, "Hi, how are you?" And at first I was like, "What do you mean? What's wrong with 'Hi, how are you?'" Well, I'm walking in the hall, people just go, "Hi, how are you?" And they walk by, they're not waiting for the answer. That's
Yeah.
so insulting. And and they're like, "Well, how can I know when they wanna know how I am? And how can I ask? I wanna know how are what can we do? And I said, well, it's kind of the tone. But yes, hi, how are you as one word
Yeah.
is a little bit used as like it's just part of the hello.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
if you stop to listen, to answer, I understand why it was insulting that they walked by without answering. But
Yeah.
that's a big one. Like, how are you? But the way I ask you is going to be different than the way I ask somebody else.
Mhm.
And we have to give time for that. Not everyone's going to communicate in these group settings, especially on Zoom.
Yeah.
We're all staring at each other. We're seeing our faces. We barely get a break. It's exhausting. It's
Yeah.
more exhausting than in person.
Yeah.
So give people options of how to communicate with each other. Say it out loud like, hey, people can talk on the Slack. You can message me. You can
Yeah.
send me an email. Come by later. Oh, I'm going to always be in my office every day from 9 to 9:15 having coffee. So if anyone wants to call me on the phone or stop in because you're in the office, come on by.
Yeah.
Like, but give everyone these different options because everyone needs a different way.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. We are down to 30 seconds. We have had such rich conversation in the comments today. And again, this has been all about techniques and strategies to deal with the opportunity that presents itself when there is conflict. And conflict is something we, as Charity said, and as Leslie said, we will never avoid. Here's Leslie's connect information right here. I'm trying to get my finger to point in the right spot. Her website, The Conflict Strategist, that is also her YouTube handle. Subscribe to her YouTube channel. She is Leslie Nidick on LinkedIn. You definitely want to connect with her and subscribe to that YouTube channel, because there is so much that comes out that is just really good practical advice and information that everybody can use and implement for healthier, happier relationships in the workplace and beyond. And I think that you can't get better than that. So I'm so grateful to you for being here with me today. I definitely want to do another one with you. I want to bring you back. We can maybe just talk about some case studies and some other things. But I have just had such a great experience talking to you. I knew it would be. I knew it would be a great conversation. I have now put us over. I do apologize for that. But for everybody who was here live with us today, thank you so much. If you're watching on the replay, thank you so much. Follow Leslie on YouTube, follow her on LinkedIn, check out her website. And here is to healthy conflict mitigation and conversations. Healthy conversations going forward, because we're all just peopling on the planet together, and what could be better than doing it together? So thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We're going to let everybody go with that. And